Hey everyone, Mark Price here at devslopes.com, and today we are going to make our ugly ingredient list not so ugly. We're going to make it fun, and I'm going to show you also how to make reusable components, and we're going to do some really cool things that you can't really do in any other type of framework or package. So let's go ahead and get started. First things first, you're going to want to grab your ingredients project that we've already created. I'll do that now myself. I'm going to copy this. I'm going to put it here on my desktop, and we're going to call this ingredients-style. Okay. And so a few things that we're going to use Bootstrap. And in order to use Bootstrap, we're going to need jQuery. So let's go ahead and grab that now. Get Bootstrap. Now, Bootstrap, again, we've talked about this, is a few different things. It is a grid system, and it also has a theme system where you can actually theme components and things like that. And if you want to use any of their cool Bootstrap features, you need jQuery to use it. So let's go ahead and download Bootstrap. And we're going to download the actual code files because we don't want to add unneeded load times to our browser. Very good. So I'm going to open up this ingredients project here. Ingredient style. Let's move it here, move this here. And inside of public, we're going to create a new folder called CSS. Open that there. And in our CSS folder here, where the files are, we're going to grab bootstrap theme.min.css, and we're going to grab bootstrap.min.css. And let's just go ahead and I'll just drag them over. Very good. And then the last thing we're going to need is jQuery. So, and I'm just showing you this again. Repetition helps us ingrain what we should be doing. I try not to use CDNs when I don't have to. You probably shouldn't either. It slows down your web page because it has to download the actual files. So let's go ahead and download jQuery. We'll download the compressed production version, show and finder, and I'm going to drag this over into my CSS folder. Okay, that is looking good. Now what I'm going to do is Command Space on my terminal to open it up, make this bigger here, CD desktop, and we're going to go to CD ingredients-style. Okay, looking great. So there's our project, and what I'm going to do is Atom dot, and it's going to open up this entire folder structure in Atom. There it goes. Okay, looking good. Cool. So let's go ahead and get started. We've got our Bootstrap involved. Let's first off open up our file structure here again. I'm going to open up the window so we can see what we're currently looking at here. Public, and we're going to go to index.html. And as you can see, this is our unstyled ingredients list. Let's make sure it still works. Okay, all is well. It definitely is working. Very good. So that's cool. In fact, let's go ahead and just put this over here on the right-hand side, and I'll put the code on the left-hand side so we can see both in action at the same time. Yeah, it looks pretty ugly. Okay, so what we want to do is add styling to it, and there's a few different ways you can do it with React. Now, keep in mind, React also does support straight CSS, so you can just use CSS as you've always used it, or I'm going to show you a few little tricks here too. So we're going to go to List Manager. Okay, and what we want to do is just make it look a little bit nicer, maybe with a panel heading on the top and some colors maybe. So we're just going to make it look a little bit nicer. It's not going to be a lot of work here. Let me pull open what we got here. Let's see. Okay, so this is our listmanager.jsx. This includes the input box, the button, and then the list itself. So let's go ahead and figure out what we want to do with this first. So as usual, and as I always do, I start with the Bootstrap grid system first to get the actual layout of where things are going to be on the screen. Very important. And then I always work down to styling and things afterwards. So let's go ahead and do that now. So this is our render function in our list manager. Let's go ahead and do a class name. Now, a class name allows you to set CSS classes to your actual elements. Now, maybe you're wondering, why didn't we just use class? This is a div here. Well, if you remember, we're using JSX, okay? And JSX will confuse class, which is React.create class, it can confuse a React class with an actual CSS class. So class name is where you put your CSS classes here, okay, if you're going to do it here in JSX. If you go over to your index.html, you'll use classes as normal here because this is a regular HTML file. But in your JSX, always remember, if you want to set a class name, you need to do it here. And what we're going to do is use the smallest bootstrap sizing for small screens. If you don't want to do all the work in writing upwards, like all the way to large screens, just write it for the smallest screens, and it'll support everything bigger than that. And what we're going to say is we want this about 4 columns wide. Now, if you think about this here, we've got an input box and a button, so I'm just estimating. I want it about 4 columns wide. That makes the most sense, that it's going to fit everything that we need. Okay, the next thing I want to do is set the actual title, like make it look nice on the title. So if we go over to Get Bootstrap here, okay, just in case you forgot, go to Components, and you can do a search. We're going to search for panel, and then it gives examples of how to use panels, and we're going to kind of do something like this for our list, okay? I'm not going to reference Bootstrap website too much anymore. I'm just doing this one time so you can see that this is where you're going to go to get your answers. Again, just go on there. If you're thinking, how can I style this? What's a good way to do it? Go onto the Bootstrap website and look at the components and see what's available to you. So we're going to use a panel. So let's go ahead and set that now. So we got a header here. So we need a div. When working with Bootstrap, it's always good to put everything inside of divs instead of on actual elements themselves, like a header element or things like that. Always do it on a div. And not style, excuse me. We're going to do class name equals panel dash default. Okay. And we want the whole entire thing inside of a panel. So let's end that div down here. I'm going to highlight this and press tab to indent it. So we want the whole thing inside of a panel. Now we need a panel heading. And like I just mentioned, I don't want to put the heading directly on the H3. We always want to do it on a div. So div, oh goodness. Okay, class name equals, we're going to say panel dash heading. Now these are Bootstrap classes here. I did not create these. And we just want the heading for the header itself. So end the div like so. I'm going to indent this here. And the rest of the stuff we want to wrap inside of the panel body class. Again, just Bootstrap classes. Look at the documentation. We're going to call this panel dash body. There we go. And there we go. Okay. So I'm going to save this here. So we've got some basic Bootstrap in there. Now, if you notice, if we refresh our page, nothing's probably happening here. And that's because we haven't linked the files yet. So let's do that now. Let's go into index.html. And here in our scripts, we're going to want to do this before our main script because we want our main script to have access to the things that we need. So we're going to say script source equals, and this is js/jQuery-1.11.3.min.js. Okay. And let's end that script here. By the way, I'm sorry if I'm having to type all this explicitly. I don't want to confuse you and have all kinds of crazy keystrokes and commands. If you have your own favorite commands and keystrokes, feel free to put your autocomplete in there and everything else. So there's our jQuery script. Let's go ahead and get our CSS scripts in here. So in our header, right here, let's go ahead and link those in. Rel equals style sheet. Some just basic CSS referencing here. And this is in the CSS folder, bootstrap.min.css. Okay. And then we'll go ahead and say link rel equals style sheet. You thought I was going to say something else. href equals css/bootstrap-theme.min.css. Okay. So now let's go ahead and refresh our page. Oh, notice something did change. We got a little bit of a change, but it's not much and it's nothing great. So let's go ahead and make it look great. So we want to make this form look nice. We don't want it cutting onto the edge here. The add button we want to make look nice as well too. But it definitely is working. And just to be sure we have no errors, go ahead and do Command-Alt-J. That's on a Mac on your Google Chrome here. And if you go to your console tab, if you had errors or if something was missing or a linked file couldn't be referenced, you'd get an error right there. So we look like we're good to go here. I'm going to close out of this. Okay, very nice. And you know, one thing I just realized, it didn't change too much, and there's one reason why it didn't really change, and that's because we haven't compiled our code. So it changed a little bit because we implemented these CSS classes here, but it's not changing the way we want because we need to open terminal, okay? And let's go on to the desktop. So open your terminal, go to your project, and we're gonna go into ingredients-style, okay, Command K to clear. And what we're gonna do is npm start. Oops. And in my case, I have to use Node Version Manager, and I want to use Node 4.2.2. And again, the reason why I personally use Node Version Manager is because some tools I use have to use a very specific version of Node, and so I like switching back and forth to those versions. So don't worry about that too much if you're only using the one version here. So I'm going to say npm start. There we go. It's compiling, and it looks like it worked. Now let's refresh our web page here. Oh, look at that. Isn't that so pretty? You're like, what? Pretty? I mean, it's cool. I'm a man. Things aren't pretty, they're cool. Okay, ingredients looks good. So Bootstrap is definitely working in there. And again, I'm going to open the console, Command-Alt-J, and there's no problems there at all. Okay, so let's go ahead and style this up a little bit. Let's look at this button here. Totally ugly. Let's make it fabulous. So we're going to say button class name equals btn. And then btn, what do you think? Default? Let's give that a shot. Refresh. Ooh, that kind of looks like 1999 Web 2.0. Let's say primary. Button primary. Okay, there we go. A little bit better. You know, we still have spacing issues and things like that, but that's starting to look really good. Now on this input, and by the way, this is just, again, Bootstrap classes. Look up the documentation. On the input, let's set a class name here to form-control, again, a standard Bootstrap class for inputs. Okay, looking good. It's rounded. It's got a little bit of shading. Of course, the add button is now down at the very bottom, but that's okay. We'll fix that in just a moment. So think about what we want to do. We want an ingredients list that not necessarily covers the whole entire screen. That seems kind of silly. We kind of want it smaller. And we also want the add button on the right-hand side of the input box there. So let's go ahead and fix that now. Let's get the input box and the add button working as they should work. So if you notice, our entire form here is inside of this column. So the reason why this is wrapping is because in Bootstrap, when you have things inside the same column, we're basically saying, hey, everything that you do needs to be inside this column. Well, if you need something side by side, they probably should be in two separate columns, right? So let's go ahead and separate things a little bit more here now. So we want the input to be in one column and the actual button to be in its own column. So here's the panel, okay? And if we look where the input is, it's right here. So this is where you would put it. So div class name equals call dash, let's see, how big do we want the input box? Now keep in mind, anytime that you add new columns, okay, within a row, which we haven't done yet, it goes back to 12 columns again, okay? So we're not dividing 4 up there at the top. We're not dividing this 4 right here into like 3, 2, and 1. Okay, we're actually getting 12 new columns that fit within the 4, which is amazing. Bootstrap is fantastic. So we're going to say call-sm, and let's say 9. I think it should be about 9 out of 12, almost the full length of the input box. So I think that works. And I'm going to end the div here. I'm going to indent the input. And of course, we need the row, because anytime you never, ever, ever, okay, never, ever, ever, and I've told you this before, put columns within columns. Never, ever, 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 ever do that. Okay, column, row, column, row. It's not that hard of a concept to get it. Column, row, column, row. Okay, so let's make a new row here. And where do you think it should live? So we got the heading here. That's fine. Well, we need a new row whenever we want something basically to go on to the next line. So I think the new row should be these this form right here. So actually we already have a div right here we can use. We can just add the row class right here to this class name in this div that we already have. Let's make it a new row, and that'll keep it inside of here. Okay, so then we have this column here. Now we need a column for the button. Call dash sm dash, what do you think? 2? About 2 wide. That's fine. Doesn't have to be the full 12. We'll end that div. Let's go ahead and press tab to indent here. And I'm going to refresh the page. And by the way, our terminal is hard at work over here because we left it open. Watchify is continually compiling our changes, which is awesome. Refresh the page, and it didn't. Oh, there it is. So on the medium screen, it seems to have issues, but on the normal size screen, it's kind of going about where we want. I'm not going to worry too much about all the tiny changes here because you can do that on your own. We're just going to get it looking about how we want it to look. And some things will be fixed as we go along here, auto magically. So it looks good to me. Well, not that part, right about there. Okay, so it looks good. We've got them lined up about where we need them. I'm not going to fidget with it too much. Okay, so what's the next thing that we want to do? Well, I don't like the fact that ingredients is just clinged to the edge right here. I don't think it should be doing that. And also, I'm curious what it would look like if we had multiple ingredient lists there. This panel right here, it's kind of ugly. It's like this gray panel. I'm curious if we can just panel, let's say panel primary, see what that looks like. That looks better. Nice blue line. So there's our ingredient list. Now, where do we add styling? Of course, I could create a CSS file that just has styling in it, and it could do what we want with it. But here's one thing I think is absolutely fantastic about React, and this is how I'm using React. Some developers choose not to do this because they've done things a certain way for such a long time. But here's a principle. The web is moving to components, taking objects and modularizing them, okay? So everything is self-contained so they can be reusable. This is just like object-oriented programming. It's been around in non-web development for years. The idea is you take a component that you put all your styling, your classes, everything in, and it's self-contained. And then you don't have to worry about external files and dependencies and all kinds of stuff, which is really, really cool. So let's show you how to make your very own component here. We already got it mostly done. So right here in our render function, this is really cool. We can actually define styles here in code. What? Say what? Right. Var, I'm going to call this div style. It's a JavaScript object. Okay. And you can put any, not any, but most CSS properties here on the React website. There's a list of things, caveats you have to be aware of. But for instance, on this thing right here, we want some padding from the top, actually margin. We don't want anything touching it. And so let's go ahead and set a margin. And normally in CSS, you might say margin dash top with a dash. Of course, that's invalid JavaScript. So you just remove the dash. Margin top, and then we're going to say 10. Now, you don't have to even put pixels here. It knows what to do automatically. And there's a few properties where where the PX or the inherent PX like this doesn't work. And you can look that up on the React website. But for most things that you'll be using, this will work just fine. So that's our div style, right? Pretty cool. You're like, why is that cool? It's not doing anything. Well, watch this. So I can take this top div right here, right? And I can say style equals, and this is the curly brace, the interpolation, where we're going to insert the JavaScript object, div style. So I'm passing in the style. This is just like passing in CSS, right? Really cool. So I'm just passing it in right here, pure JavaScript, passing it into the div, and I'm just saying, hey, give it a margin top of 10. So if we save this, let's look at our terminal, make sure there's no errors, and there are not. Go to our web page. When I refresh this, you should now see a gap between the top of this and the browser. And there it is. Pretty dang cool. So we just set style here in our code. And the reason why this is really cool is because you can pass in things now into your ingredients list right here. And let's go ahead and just test some things out though first. I want to make sure it's still working. So eggs. Okay, yeah, it's a little bit of a spacing issue there, which I'm not too happy about, but that's not too bad. Looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and get a few more lists in here. Maybe make this a little bit smaller. There we go. A few more lists in here just to see what it looks like and make sure everything's working the way we want it to. I'm going to go to index.html. And of course, ingredients is what we are substituting in our code already. So if I go to my main.jsx, the main entry point for your application, we are passing in one list manager and we're passing in the title ingredients, and we're replacing this ingredients element right here with that one list, okay? So we want to do more now. And And remember, to get your free live help, go to devslopes.com and click on chat room. I'm there all the time, as well as a huge community of other students.